Welcome to India HR Live. This is Meetu Khanduja, your host on the show for today. And I'm really very excited to be here for two big reasons. First, we have a wonderful and diverse panel of guests joining us from India. We have some HR industry and we have some budding HR leaders. And second, of course, the topic itself is the reason for my excitement and my interest. Uh, Employee engagement. Yes, when we talk about employee engagement, it is one of the widely discussed and widely written about topic in HR. Organizations and HR professionals are doing great initiatives. They're taking great initiatives to actually take it to a bigger level. So now when we talk about employee engagement, we don't talk about money or parties or gifts or connect work. We also talk about acknowledgement, appreciation, work-life balance, or technology also. So yes, this is despite the best efforts and by best intentions, sometimes these efforts fail to produce the desired result. So what are the reasons behind employee engagement failure? So this is what we are going to discuss today with our guests. So let us welcome our guests and start this conversation with them. We have Dr. T.V. Rao. He is actually founder and initiator of HR movement in India. Hello, Dr. Rao. Hello. Are you able to hear me, sir?
Yes, last sentence, yes.
Okay. Welcome to the show, sir. We are actually not able to hear you.
You're not able to hear. I didn't say anything. Can you hear me
Okay.
now?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good.
Okay.
Okay. Then we have with us Gaurav Sani. He is the Associate Director, People Practices at Happiest Mind Technologies. Hello, Gaurav, and welcome to the show.
Hello, Meetu, and hello to everyone on the panel.
Hi, Gaurav.
Hi, hello, sir.
Okay. Then we have with us Dr. Pallav. He is actually leadership architect, career coach, change and transition specialist. Hello, Dr. Pallav, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Pallav.
Okay, maybe he's not able to hear us well. Then we have Dr. Raj with us. He is the CEO at HR Footprints Management Services. Welcome, Dr. Raj, to the show.
Thank you, Mitu. Thank
Okay,
you.
it's actually great to have you here. And last, we have Anita. She is actually the managing director at Open Space Consulting. Welcome to the show, Anita.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Okay.
Hello, Anita.
Hi, everybody, and hello to Dr. P.D. Rai. It's a great pleasure to be with him.
Okay. Shall we start with the conversation? Okay.
Sure.
Right. As I mentioned in the beginning, that employee engagement efforts sometimes fail and they don't produce the results desired. So, before we actually start with our topic of discussion, one thing I would like to know from you all is what are some of the best practices that HR professionals are now following when it comes to employee engagement? And what good initiatives are they now taking that were not there before? So, Rao sir, do you want to take this question?
Uh, you're asking me?
Yeah.
Well, I think and Isha has summarized it very well in some of the short write-up presented. Whole lot of initiatives. Initially, I think people try mostly through, first of all, conducting employee engagement surveys. And normally these surveys are pretty comprehensive. They cover various aspects, starting with policies, compensation, and the organizational culture, celebrations at the workplace, making, creating a lot of fun and pleasure at the workplace, and a whole lot of things. I think there's a lot of initiatives. In spite of this, I think the captured by engagement surveys over a period of time. I think you have very rightly chosen the topic. that these have not given the kind of results that one expects them to give. It's not that they have not, they have always failed. I think for some time they had a great impact. But in recent times, I'm not very sure we are getting the best out of some of these, and that is where the topic becomes relevant. And I have some points where I will come back to those kind of points after I think maybe one round give it to every panel member. The way they need to be handled and so on. I'll talk about it later, but I think research has reasonably demonstrated beyond doubt engaged employees are employees who are passionate about their work, their work contribute to the organizational performance, and they tend to stay with the company and also attract, I think, competent people into the company. And so on. There are a lot of positive benefits of employee engagement per se. I think today our focus is if it fails, why does it fail? Am I audible? Is that clear?
Yes, sir, you're
You're
audible,
audible.
right?
Okay.
So, yeah, Dr. Raj, do you want to add anything to that?
I guess everyone talks about employee engagement, and I personally feel employee engagement is almost like an emperor clothes. Everyone talks about it, but no one can see it. And the reason looks like I think there's almost like a very what people call as very down to earth and very practical view that all these stints these days are going to be shorter and shorter. So at the most we are talking about very specific time bound contractual engagement. We're not talking about any long term engagements and all of that. Unfortunately, I think that mindset seems to be more prevalent, and anyone talks possibly contrarian to that will be seen as unrealistic or too idealistic. So I think in the context of this belief, I guess the HR guys and the line managers have to redefine what they really mean by employee engagement and what they need to do towards strengthening employee engagement.
Okay, that's wonderful, you, Dr. Raj. Anita, what are your views on this?
Well, I would go back to the good old Maslow's theory and the Herzberg's theory of motivation. And we say that very often organizations focus only on what we call hygiene factors. They make work fun, they make the workplace very nice and interesting with good air conditioning and good college-like campus atmosphere. You have very good food courts in many of the IT companies. And all this is done in the name of engagement. But a lot of these activities, which are fun activities, they only prevent disengagement. They do not actually intrinsically engage people. In order to intrinsically engage people, it is the job, it is the career, it is the content of what he does, it's the excitement of that. There's a vision that the organization has and some larger goals that the company has. And unless there is a connect with that, intrinsic engagement will not happen. So, to me, that's what's basically going wrong with employee engagement. That people tend to focus on it purely as fun activities and somebody's just happy to be at work. But the intrinsic motivation doesn't happen with that. Yes. Did you hear me well?
Yeah.
Yeah, are you able to hear us?
Sorry, now the voice is breaking.
So, if I was to continue what I was saying, basically, I feel that employee engagement first needs to be understood. What are the things that truly engage employees, and at what level and what stage in their lives? If you have a young population, under 30 years of age, which many of the IT companies do, then you have to do a different kind of engagement activity. If you have a manufacturing firm where the population is in 40s and 50s, then the kind of employee engagement activities that you would do would be entirely different because you're catering to a very different level of maturity of the person. So I do believe that organizations need to tailor and to customize their employee engagement activities in ways which create better linkages with intrinsic motivation as well as extrinsic, so that they can achieve higher levels of engagement.
Okay, great.
Over to you.
And now you're actually better. Your voice was better, and I hope everyone was able to hear you well.
Much better, much
Okay.
better.
Yeah. Gaurav, what are your views on this?
Uh, I would agree with Anita on this thought that yes, employee engagement, a network, or the definition has to be defined. Why? Because the engagement has been mistaken with the industry specific in the recent past. It has been basically oriented towards IT sector, I would say. So it has to be basically understood that okay, what does employee engagement mean to the people? In my opinion, as Miku has asked this question, that what has been the practices which has been followed. So yes, there have been a lot of practices, advanced practices also being followed in the industry where employees are not being engaged in not maybe fun activities or maybe a kind of as Dr. Rao was saying that it has to be appreciation, work-life balance, or something like that. But now employee engagement has been there through surveys in terms of compensation also, which is the most hitting factor for an employee when he's working there. In terms of his outcome as a learning, so learning also been used as a tool now. Previously it was basically something else. Now it has been used as engagement tool. Uh, so all those factors has to be included that we have to take into account the life cycle of a organization and also the life cycle of the industry. Both into account has to be taken when we define the employee engagement.
Okay, I actually like your point that learning is also being used as an engagement tool now, Gaurav.
Very
So,
much. Yeah.
yeah, we should be discussing that too in the show later. Dr. Pallab, are you able to join us and hear us now? Okay, I guess he is not able to hear us. I'm not sure about Dr. Pallab and I'm not sure about Rahul.
I'm here.
I
Nisha,
can
I'm
see
sorry,
Rahul.
I actually could log in later, but I'm there now.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So, let us have your views on this then.
So you're saying to me, Rahul?
Yeah, right.
Oh, okay, so thank you so much for giving me this privilege, and I'm really honored to get an opportunity and introduction to each one of you. And I'm sorry I missed the first 15 minutes, so if I repeat a few things which many of you may have already mentioned, please, I regret and apologize for that. To me, when a subject like an engagement becomes a point of conversation between working professionals, and I think it's a privilege for us to have Dr. Rao amongst us. What I understand as an executive, for me, engagement means a workplace where people actually work. They deliver and create value for the company that they work for, and they do not need to necessarily wait for an endeavor or a program from an HR to actually get them to produce or deliver on value creation process in that company. So somewhere in this last decade or so, when we all started to talk about employee engagement, and I actually, prior to being with this brick and mortar company called SR, used to work for Dell, and I had some of you just mentioned about why and how it became a fad of a sorts for more technology companies. It's because I think somewhere we all actually felt that we in HR need to actually have something new or different to talk about to our colleagues and people in the business, especially a large workforce. So why not we create certain agendas for people to follow? And in doing that thing, I think somewhere we mistook what was supposed to be in hygiene to be a specific initiative. If you actually have right atmospherics at your workplace, people think of that as also an engagement initiative. Providing a nice, conducive work environment is not, it's not a special thing for you you to do or provide to your employee. It is the minimum that you can provide to an employee. And if that minimum is not provided for, if that minimum is not provided for, what else are we actually going to provide our colleagues? I think we need to look at each of these as what could have actually unfortunately been received as maybe fads by our colleagues in the business. A highly motivated employee doesn't need an HR initiative. He needs a clarity on the job. He needs something that he actually is allowed to do in a free and a fair workplace where he is compensated for what he has actually delivered. And the compensation plans that we actually have in the organizations are transparent and clear. If we are able to create
I think we lost him.
PPTs and especially create some new thoughts for presentations to executive committees or to the employees, you would have a workplace where people will actually feel motivated because they have a understanding manager who they report to, great colleagues to work with who actually provide them and provide each of them, each of the peers an opportunity to learn from others. I think then engagement will not fail. That's my view, limited view, and I think Dr. Rao has now joined us.
Yeah, yeah, I'm back.
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
lost connection. Back.
Okay, that was actually wonderful to hear some of your views, some of your best views about employee engagement. So, since we are talking about motivation and engagement and involvement, and we're talking about best practices that are actually there in the industry now, so let us get straight to the question. Like, why does it happen? What are the reasons for failure of these great employee engagement initiatives? So, I would like to ask you, Anita.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
Uh,
yeah.
are you able to hear us, Anita? Are you able to
Yes,
hear
can
me?
you just repeat the last part of your question because I was listening
I just
to.
wanted to know, like, what are the reasons for failure of employee engagement initiatives?
Well, I think I did outline it in my first response to you that companies tend to take a one-sided view. They tend to focus more on the hygiene factors to prevent disengagement rather than on intrinsic engagement factors. The other reason I believe is that you got to tailor make your engagement program depending upon the kind of industry, the kind of age group, the kind of mindset that your organization has. And you cannot just deploy employee engagement initiatives without considering those factors. The third reason I do believe is that employee engagement is a two-way psychological contract. And sometimes, the employers and the leaders try their best and they reach out but the employee has to meet you halfway. The young generation today is increasingly multitasking, increasingly, got a lot of social activities and social media going on. They don't want to spend 8 hours a day focusing on work all the time. So I do believe that to some extent it is also a sign of the times that we are in. But the young generation today also does not receive the invitations for engaging themselves in the organization. They prefer to stay apart and they prefer sometimes to, only bring a little bit of themselves to work and not the whole person. So I do believe it's a combination of all of these factors that does contribute to employee disengagement. Over to you, Nita. I hope you
Okay.
heard me this time.
Oh yeah, you were audible. You were great. Okay. Let me ask Gaurav. Gaurav, what are your views on this?
Yeah, I would agree because every time when I speak, Anita is the first one, so I have to. I agree with Anita on some of the things. Yes, very
Yeah.
rightly. But my opinion is a little different on that because still employee engagement has to be done. There has to be some activities which needs to be done in the organization when people are working there. Why it fails? Yeah, if you ask me on few things like in a very short form is communication, branding and positioning of that kind of engagement activity you're doing. I would say, employee involvement in that engagement activity. Then outcome which employee is supposed to get out of that activity will also kind of will be a reason that it fails. Then obviously the involvement at the social level. Do we have a platform where internal platform in the organization where, like we have a Facebook and other things outside, do we have a platform there where people can express themselves freely? So all these things, when we don't take taken into account, it leads to failure in any employee engagement activity. That's my opinion.
Okay, great. Gaurav, like you said, employee involvement. I really have an interesting thing to ask you all. When we talk about employee engagement and we talk about employee involvement, is it one and the same thing, or is it different? So I just wanted to know because I have read a lot of things about it. Some articles say involvement is different, engagement is different. So
Yes.
I would like to ask Dr. Raj, what do you have to say on this?
About involvement and engagement.
Yes.
Okay. No, my take is I think involvement is one of the vehicles to strengthen engagement. If you don't involve me, possibly I'll get disengaged. And yeah, so it is a tool, and the outcome is an engagement. So that's my view. And of course, coming back to the question that you asked earlier, why does engagement fail? I I want to present three specific points here that I think we are seeing a practice of seeing engagement activities as events. I think it's not an event, and it's a very continuous engagement. So that is one part that I have about engagement. Why does engagement fail is because we see it as a discrete event, but not as a continuous process. The second issue that I have is, I think engagement is absolutely an internal affair and very emotional aspect. Though we may not talk so much as emotion in corporate world, but I think it is a lot to do with emotion. Engagement, disengagement is an emotional feeling. I think what we possibly have is people who are extremely, process oriented, and obviously processes are very important to manage the large scale that we have been dealing with now in organization. Now the challenge for HR guys seems to be that do I run it as a process or do I really relate as an emotion? How to put emotion into a process? I think that seems to be a very big challenge for HR guys. And the third and most important aspect that I notice and practically seen in companies is engagement activities seem to be lacking the sense of authenticity and consistency. Authenticity in the sense, I'm using a strong word rather, in the sense, do you really mean when you say something? Do you really want to engage me? Is it really coming from your heart? If it's not, obviously, I think I may not take it very seriously. So a lot of these symbolic aspects that we seem to be doing, if we add a touch of authenticity to the whole thing, possibly it will reach the emotion of the employee. So these are three things that I have to say. We should not be seeing it as an event. It's more to do with emotion. I think we need to pump in a lot more authenticity. That's my take about the strengthening the employee engagement and not making it fail.
Okay, that was actually a wonderful thing to hear, and your point on authenticity actually reminds me of cases. Like we have certain situations, maybe during the time of recession, when organizations they actually fire a lot, and then they are actually very much eager to retain the remaining employees, and they launch certain initiatives, certain employee engagement initiatives. So,
Yeah.
do you think that these situational initiatives are actually able to create the desired impact whenever they are done during time of recession or any such times? So, Dr. Pallab, are you able to hear us? I'm not sure actually. I guess he is not able to join us. Dr. Rao, will you like to
Yeah.
take up that question?
Uh, I lost quite a bit of the conversation, but rather than answering your question, may I have your permission to say what I want to say? Okay,
Yeah, sure.
can I go ahead?
Please, please.
Okay, if you can hear me, I want to say one of the reasons why employee engagement fails is we have put the ownership on the organization. We have always felt organization is to be engaged. I think that's where our basic mistake has been. I think we need to ask the question, employee engagement for whose benefit? Employee engagement is largely for the benefit of the employees themselves. I'll give you an example. I have conducted a survey in one of the nationalized banks and see the extent to which employees are engaged. And I found in the same area, in the same zone or region, two deputy general managers who joined the bank the same year and posted in the same place had employee engagement scores ranging from 35% to 85%. And the reasons for them to get less engaged when we went into the details was the personnel policies. Both of them wanted to be posted in the state of their choice. Like some like to be posted in their own home state, and some want to be posted outside the home state. If the bank has a policy to post you in the state from which you come, the fellows who want to be posted in states that they don't belong to get upset. So like that, we found several variables which are contradicting, and then we decided the bank will manipulate the personal policies to bring up the satisfaction level of the 35%. And we discovered maximum they can change is about 15%. That means the 35 can be brought to 50%, but the moment you personal policies you change this way or that way can never be 100, can never create 100% engagement on all employees. Now it occurred to us that what is the psychological mindset of the DGM who has a 35% engagement score, particularly after 6 o'clock when he walks back home. He is walking back home at 6 o'clock from the office, a dissatisfied person, an unhappy person, and imagine the kind of impact he has on the family. There is stress on his part, there is a stress in the family. So we discovered that employee lack of engagement does more damage to the individual than to the organization. So therefore, it occurred to us that can we get this 35% to take charge of his own engagement? The personnel policies can do very little. Therefore, what we need to do is help this individual to recognize what he is doing to himself by carrying every day a low engagement score. Now, this has an implication. The implication is, can organizations now look at employee engagement is something which the employees themselves manage? So which means an engaged employee is a happy employee, and happiness is good more for the individual. And if it is good for the individual, then I think it is likely to benefit the organization. Now, this is where mass treatment of surveys fails. Because in our surveys, we are looking for universal solutions. We are not looking at individualized solutions. This is the biggest insight we have got. Now, the way now I do engage, anytime employee engagement surveys is, I ask the individual to keep a copy of his score. And after we compute the employee engagement survey results, I ask individuals to look at where do they fall in the organizational continuum. And if you are lower down the organizational continuum, then you have to work hard to change your own engagement score. Don't expect the company to do anything. You're going to have a miserable life, miserable future. So I think we'll have to change, and we can't just say it is organizations who have to create a great work atmosphere, and it is organizations who have to create career choices, the organizations who have to change the compensation. I mean, you look at how engaged are IIM Ahmedabad with those salaries they get, and in spite of the comments students make in films like Two States, where I'm sure some of you have watched this, the guy says the professor will continue to teach the same thing after batch and will continue to have the same salary, and you and I after 2 years will have about 10 times the salary he's earning. I think what a satirical kind of a thing. Professors, I think you must see, are very happy and they think that they matter a lot. The amount of work that people in IIMs put in is phenomenal. That is in spite of the fact their own students get 10 times and even 100 times the salaries. Now that's the secret. You have to get people to enjoy. And that is what Dr. Sarabhai has done in IIM Ahmedabad when he said there is no hierarchy here. And 1962, and the organization is an inverted pyramid. And there are only two promotions. Actually, in the beginning, one promotion. After 30 years of age, promotion, but you look for making an impact. So I think you create a culture, but you get the individuals to take charge of their own kind of commitment. That is the biggest lesson that I could draw. Sorry, I've taken a little longer time because I don't know when the connection will go off and I will be able to say this. But these are the points I wanted to say.
That's absolutely fine with us, Doctor. And we are actually very much, we are honored to have your views on this. So let me ask Dr. Raj, what are your views, sir, on this situational HR employee engagement initiatives that you were talking about?
Yeah, I know. I really liked what TV has just mentioned. Two very critical points, that the onus of engagement must be on the employee, and he also said the faculty in the premier institutes are the most engaged, despite not being paid the highest or whatever. I completely agree. But I just wanted to give a couple of very interesting contrarian examples. On one side, when we say onus of the engagement must be on the employee, I was just a little puzzled when one of the very young employee in one of the companies was so very upset that in the vending machine, one flavor of the coffee was removed. And the person said, oh my God, this company has just not caring for employees anymore. The soup is not available. The flavor of the coffee is not available. So I just have this interesting question that, there's an entitlement mentality of, since I'm working for you, it's your job to take care of me. And so I'm doing a great favor by working for you. If as long as we don't understand that, mindset and do something about that mindset, I think we will always have the same challenge of dealing with the expectations of employees, where they think they are entitled for many things. So,
Okay, right.
yeah.
Great. So, Rahul, what are your views on this? We're talking about, we are talking about employee engagement surveys, and then we are talking about the personalization of HR employee engagement initiatives. And there are still times when these surveys that we're talking about, they actually are here since ages when we talk about employee engagement. But still they are not that success that we expect them to be. So what are your views on this?
I think first, let us acknowledge the two very clear concepts that both Dr. Ballab and TV Rao sir have actually shared just now with us. I think the question that you had asked earlier to differentiate between involvement and engagement, and the answer that you got, I think actually is the beginning of the essence of an organization where there are a set of engaged employees and another organization where there may not be. Or maybe within the one organization where you may have some employees who are engaged and others are not, is because how many times as an organizational process we ensure involvement of people in the decision-making process. I think, and what Dr. Vallabh actually mentioned was that if you have a process in an organization where people are involved, and I think he alluded to the fact that if people are involved in decision-making, it will bring about an engaged employee. Now, I think the paradigm shift that we all need to adapt to, and I think today Professor Rao has actually mentioned very clearly that engagement is an onus of an employee and not an organization. And that is something which we need to actually focus on. So whatever number of surveys that we would be doing, I think we need to also move away from one more mentality, which is that if other companies are doing survey, let me also do and find out how many number of people do I have who are engaged. That also is a mentality that we need to move away from. We need to learn from the example that PV Rao gave just now to all of us, that IIM Ahmedabad since 1962 has been beacon of creating an engaged culture where people have shared vision. People were involved in creating something which is so unique, and they enjoyed and loved participating in the process of creating the talent which is world class, and that in itself got an engagement. So somewhere as a business leaders, we need to allow the business to take a lead and say, hey guys, let us create something unique. And if people see a opportunity to participate in creating that something which is unique, you do not need to bother with HR running initiative or engagement. People will be engaged. You need to just create an environment where such a business leader like Mr. Sarabhai that he gave example of is supported in that endeavor. And despite two levels of promotion in 35 years of a career of a professor, the incumbent is engaged. He gets a tenth or hundredth of the compensation vis-a-vis the student they teach, and they still remain engaged. So all the factors that we normally talk about as compensation being a motivator, of promotion or designation being a motivator, actually has no meaning today. And I think we need to just move away from this fad called engagement initiative, rather than creating an environment of engagement in which what both of these gentlemen spoke about, those kind of initiatives can thrive. That's my limited point.
Okay, great. Thanks for bringing up that concept of uniqueness in your conversation, because we were kind of missing it out here in the discussion. So,
I'm sorry, this is connectivity issue then maybe.
okay, I guess so, because we are actually losing quite a few conversations in the middle. Okay,
Nobody heard me?
yes, we all
So,
heard you,
Yeah,
but it,
no,
your
I
We
did.
all
thing
I
is
heard
did.
me?
still.
Yeah.
I heard you
I'm
every
so
word of what
sorry.
you said so
Yeah.
clearly. I want to build on a point that Dr. Chirurao had mentioned,
Anita, I'm sorry. I'm working on out of my iPhone 4.
No, we heard everything you
Yes,
said.
we heard everything.
We heard.
I heard very
Thanks, Anita.
Yeah. So,
may I
Adding up to
make
that,
my
Anita.
yes, actually, I wanted to build on a point that Professor T.V. Rao made, and that was about how what does he do after he goes home from work, and what does he do to get a 35% engagement score, and what can he do to change himself. I do believe that employees get disengaged if the boss-subordinate relationships are not nurturing and not fostering engagement. And I do believe that we have to work with not just employee engagement, we also have to work with leadership of bosses, not just at the top level, but at multiple levels of leadership. So how and what way do we build the character of those who lead the employees and those who interact with them on a day-to-day basis? Because if we do not focus on this manager who is got a 35% score of employee engagement, we will be missing a large chunk of the pie. So we have to acknowledge that one of the causes for employee disengagement is leadership at all levels. And perhaps it begins from top down. There was a time when
Yeah.
we had charismatic leaders, people who we really admired and who inspired us and whom we would follow to the end of the world just to do whatever they would command us to do, almost like a Pied Piper. But today, that quality of leadership is missing. And maybe it's again a sign of the times that organizations and industries becoming increasingly fragmented and leadership is becoming increasingly politicized, and not necessarily a person who has the capacity to truly influence people deeply inside their heart, but people who are there for other reasons in positions of leadership. So we have to focus on leadership building at all levels if we want to really bring about employee engagement. That was the point I wanted to make. Over to you, Meeta.
Okay, that's actually a great point. Leadership at all levels when we talk about engagement. Okay, I'm actually excited. I'm actually getting more excited about this discussion. We have a question from our audience, and she's also one of our India HR Live writers. Nupur wanted to know how to mold employees' mentality that companies owe them certain benefits. So, would you like to take up that question?
Me too. Yes, it is difficult. It's not an easy task, but it is a process actually. And I would like to take up some pointers here, and this will answer the question automatically when Dr. Raj was mentioning one thing, emotional aspect, and your intentions to do something for your employees. So I'm talking about two things here. One is obviously that yes, how to change this mindset and mentality that is organization responsibility for engagement. I would take an example here, if you allow me,
Yeah,
for
sure.
my current organization. So, although it's an IT company, and what we do is like we have a thought leadership engagement platform. Uh, for an IT professional, it's creating IPs, writing blogs, and creating his own brand. Creating your own brand means not inside the company only, outside also. It's very important. He has been known from that. So we have started this initiative. Like one of this is that he has been involved in that full process himself, and it is not organization responsibility to make him a kind of a thought leader, but it is own responsibility to contribute in the thought leadership thing. So this is one of the examples which we can create such things and such platforms for the people. Few things here is that yes, it will not change overnight. It will be a process, and the company has to involve the people, which kind of in various process, because every individual has their own priorities. Every individual thinks in own manner, and organization to organization everything is different. We cannot have one set formula for one thing that how it will change. But yes, because FMCG companies will have different orientation towards it, and the employees will have different orientation. Manufacturing will have other different orientation. IT will have different, because they are in a different phase of growth and different phase of employee engagement things. Even the fun activities today at manufacturing units will have a major impact, because I read somewhere in on one of the great places to work discussion. I was discussing something with the CEO of Great Place to Work. What he says that one of the manufacturing company got a very high rating because they used to give their workers chilled water. Can you imagine this? And this is 2 years back survey, because for them still that chilled water is a big thing. And for an IT guy or maybe companies basically working on sectors might be a kind of a very low thing. Okay, it is supposed to be provided by the organization. So
Yeah.
it is dependent on this life cycle, industry, and other things. But yes, the answer lies is that are we honest as an organization to give that platform to the employee when we involve him? If we are honest and emotional about it, we'll be able to turn around that kind of perception that it is organization's responsibility.
Okay. That was actually great, Gaurav, and I agree that yes, most of the employee engagement activities are and should be based on employees' expectations,
Yeah.
and they differ widely. They differ widely across industries. So I will just take a pause here, and for our audience, if you have any questions for our guests, you can tweet it at our Twitter stream with the hashtag India HR Live, or you can post it on our Facebook page. So we'll be very happy to take your questions. So. We have another question from SVR. He wants to know like how come we overcome the employee engagement challenge of employees across demographics and across different cultures. So I would like to ask that to Dr. Pallab. Dr. Pallab, did you hear my question well?
Dr. Color is not on.
Okay, yes, she's again not here. Then Dr. Raj, would you like to take up that question?
Sure.
Okay.
That's um, About the question, how can we overcome the employee engagement challenges across demographies and across cultures?
Yes.
Right. I always believe that I think employee engagement is cannot be managed as a standardized process across the organization, even within the same culture. Even if you were to look at it only India centric company, I don't think one kind of a process will engage every employee, because as I notice in my practice, I think employees get engaged or disengaged for very personal reasons, and those reasons we might be able to list down a few of them, but they keep varying from person to person so heavily. So I think the earlier point that I guess Rahul made is very relevant, or Anita made, that about the leadership aspect. So I personally believe, I think the localized initiatives, personalized personalized listening seems to be the most critical one, which I'm afraid I have to admit that I think it's not been at the highest, and it's not been the best. Both on the part of, possibly I can put my neck out and make this statement, both on the part of HR as well as among the leaders. And to such an extent, in one of my client companies, I had to clarify to them who their HR manager is. And in fact, they were debating whether Mr. X is their HR manager or Mr. Y is the HR manager. So if we are going to be engaged to that level and listening to the employees, it's going to be very difficult. So if you want to manage across cultures, across geographies, or even locally, I think we just need to localize and listen quite a bit. We need more and more emotionally intelligent leaders, people who have all the patience and true desire to understand and listen to their own employees.
Yeah, okay.
Nisha, this is Rahul here. I just wanted to mention that, while I was earlier referring to Dr. Pallab, I actually meant Dr. Raj, so I'm just clarifying that.
Okay.
Oh, okay, Rahul.
Yeah. Okay. Now, since Gaurav, you're talking about branding, employee engagement, and Dr. Raj just spoke about personalization of employee engagement activities. So, do we have Dr. Rao here? Because I wanted to ask this to him. Okay, I guess we left him again. Okay, we have to move him. So, Anita, would you like to answer that?
Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. What can organizations actually do when it comes to branding their employee engagement initiatives, and or what additional they can do to add that personalization to their employee engagement initiatives?
I think they need to create a vision, which it's going back to the what we did in the 1980s, and they need to create a vision that is very compelling and very inspiring that people identify with, and everybody sees a role for themselves in that leadership. It's about building the flock. It's about building a coherent, cohesive kind of a flock of people, and nothing binds more than a vision that people passionately believe in, and nothing binds more than good leadership, the kind of leadership. It starts from the top and it cascades down from there. I do believe that's the single most initiative that we can really make a lot of difference. The second point I also wanted to make was that when we hire people, we hire them for their skills and their knowledge. Whether it's on campus, whether you go to the IIM Ahmedabad to have even the top 20 people in the class, or whether it's in the engineering colleges, we hire for skill. We don't hire for leadership. We don't hire for psychological fit. We don't hire for cultural fit with the organization. We don't hire
Yeah.
for people who would believe in the company and would believe in aligning themselves with the organization goals. So when we hire, we don't hire right. We only want the candidate who is the most qualified for the position and has the best quality of skills. But I do believe that if you have a person who's aligned well to organization vision and culture and fits well in the system, even if he's deficient on some skills, we should still take him on because such people can always learn the skills and they apply themselves in ways which are far more productive than a person who has all skill but no proper attitude to go with it. So I do believe when we hire people, we should also hire well. So that's another point I'd like to add here. I hope that addresses your question. Maybe
So yes,
Professor.
yes, Anita, and then it again brings another interesting point of discussion that when we hire, we don't hire right, and then we know we want to train them and we want to involve them and we want to engage them. So then, of course, it becomes another lot more challenging afterwards. So, like what we are already discussing right now about employee engagement and personalization of employee engagement activities, we have another question from one of our Facebook followers, Shrikant, and he wants to know whether emotional attachment creates more employee engagement. So, Dr. Rao, would you like to add about attachment to employee engagement?
Yeah, well, I certainly think that it creates emotional attachment to the organization, to the department, to the people around. The work culture certainly enhances employee engagement. In fact, I think Uday Parikh and I used to conduct a role efficacy lab in which we use it to get people to write essays about their role and analyze the role on 10 dimensions. Do you feel central? Do you feel that your job is integrated with other jobs? Do you feel you have scope to influence? Are you clear about the larger goals of your own kind of a role, superordinate goals, and so on? So we have 10 dimensions, then we give the feedback and get people to understand why, if they are not being efficacious in their role, how can they become more efficacious and so on. This is essentially to create an attachment to the job. So you make your own kind of a role. And then we would suggest to organizations to work out mechanisms for enhancing the role efficacy. So I certainly think that this is one of the ways. Now emotions have so much of magnitude. They can be simple to very complex. Certainly, role efficacy gets you to be attached. Now I'll give another example. I mentioned IIM, which is non-hierarchical. ISRO is pretty hierarchical. Also started by Sarabhai. People are emotionally attached to their job. See the amount of happiness they have all had with the success yesterday, or not only yesterday. I once was doing a program for them and I asked them what they feel about the organization. They felt extremely happy about the organization and felt that every single fellow, top to bottom, owns the organization. Ownership comes emotional attachment. That is what I feel. I don't want to say organizations don't have a role, they also have a role. But I think we should focus much more on the individual management. I don't know if I answered the question or I have said a lot more.
It's
Dr.
very
Rao?
clear to me. That's yeah, yeah.
Okay, actually, he was not very much audible to me. So,
No, it was very clear to all of us.
okay, that's great then. Okay, um, Dr. Sorry, we have another question from our guest, and I would like Rahul to you to answer this. One of our India HR Live writer, Kunjal, he wants to know when we talk about employee engagement, we always focus on employees, but how important is leadership engagement for organizations?
I think all of us have been, in this last 15, 20 minutes, have been speaking basically about the quality of leadership that is required in the company to be able to create an engaged workplace and an engaged employee. And I think Anita mentioned it very clearly and in a very lucid manner that if we do not have leadership across all levels, we will not be able to attain any level of engagement. And the ownership lies with the style of leadership, with the ability of the leadership to motivate, with the ability of the leadership to be able to ensure a shared vision is enjoyed and there is an emotional connect, as just now Professor Rao was mentioning, with the common cause. And I think that's the clear responsibility of the leader to make sure, and I'm saying leader not just at the top but at various level of the organization, to ensure that everyone has an appreciation and participation in that shared vision. If you involve people, and that I think is the essence of leadership, you would be able to get people to deliver in the value creation process only if you involve them. And that is the principal responsibility of leadership, and hence engagement at the leadership level is critical. When Anita mentioned you must hire right, what she meant was that leaders need to actually play the role to ascertain at the time of hiring itself whether the person will form a social, emotional, and a cultural fit rather than just a competency and a skill-based fit. I think those are some of the levers which leaders will have to actually display by showing examples of right choice of decision making in every business decisions that they make, including the hiring decisions. Was I
Okay,
audible, Misha?
Yeah.
that was yes, yes, you were audible, and we are actually almost out of time for our show. So I would like to ask you all one common question that is actually there in my mind since the beginning of the show. How do employees contribute to employee engagement failure?
Can you
So,
repeat the question?
Anita, would you like to start with that?
Well, like I said in an earlier part of my talk, is that I do believe that the employee engagement is a two-way contract. It's a psychological contract between employer and employee. And it's like a bridge that you build. You build a bridge from both sides, and then the bridge comes together and joins in the middle. So also with employee engagement, the psychological contract has to be both ways, and the onus lies on both the employer as well as the employee. So I do believe that the young generation needs to be really inculcated into them by virtue of the kind of education we give them, the business schools, the engineering colleges, and all the other streams from where they come, need to look at building that character to start with. Because, education begins at home and perhaps even at a social level. So at the education level itself, we need to start building character and attitude of employees, because sometimes employees themselves, I know an employee who left an organization because the color of the lighting was not enough. I know another employee who left an organization because he lives in in Bombay, and he didn't want to commute up to Navi Mumbai. He wanted a job closer to home. And for silly reasons like that, people disengage and people find themselves demoralized in the organization. So I do believe that they also need to go the extra mile to bring their commitment levels and their engagement levels to the organization. Because ultimately it's a two-way contract. They're getting a salary, they're getting a career, they're getting a brand of an organization. What is it that they give in return? Two-way contract. It cannot be one way from employers alone.
Okay, wonderful. So, Dr. Raj, can we have your views on this, please?
Yeah. The question is how employees contribute to the failure of engagement initiatives.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I was just reflecting on this question. I think there's one single thing that I could think of is ever increasing expectations and comparisons.
Great.
The organization possibly tries to understand the expectations and tries to meet up to some, but obviously you can't stop an employee from comparing from his or her colleagues in other organizations, and therefore the expectations are ever increasing. But one of the biggest challenges that I keep hearing is how do I limit these expectations? So that's, I mean, ever increasing expectations obviously will create disengagement.
That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. Right. So, Dr. Rao, what are your views on this?
Yeah, I didn't quite get the question. Can you?
Okay. The question is, how do employees themselves contribute to the failure of employee engagement activities?
Well, I think it is employees who should take charge of their own performance as well as engagement. The way they can contribute is being frank in any surveys that are conducted. And number two, ask the HR department for the results of the surveys. Number three, maintain, I think, their own data and constantly look inward and recognize that engagement is for their own good. Don't expect the organization to change their engagement and voice whenever they want the organization to make changes. Don't expect the organization to keep changing everything they want because there will always be contradictions. So I think these are all the kind of, we need a hell of a lot of employee education and HR education, and also the top management education. All the three people, three categories of people need to be educated. Largely, I would start with HR people. I think they need to recognize that employee engagement is a process, not a technique, not a merely a technology, and they need to work with people at individual level, and they need to be working with the top management. A whole lot of things that have to be. I think there should be a paradigm that should take place.
Okay, so Gaurav, what do you have to add on to this?
Uh, yeah, everybody being like kind of contributed a lot on that, but I would say one thing that if I've understood the question correctly,
Hmm.
uh, if I say that organization or all the activities or HR is basically a car and employees is the fuel to it. So any engagement activity will be failed if employee is not engaged himself. So employee is very important and they are basically one of the most important reason that they contribute to the field. And how? It's basically the expectation, nothing else. And the demand and supply in the industry. So it's, if I have a very high, because expectation is increasing day by day. And I rightly said by Anita also that it is expectation that we have to set it right. Or Dr. Raj, I don't forgot. But expectation is one of the reasons that our employees engagement fail. And the right communication also among between the employee and the organization. That's also one of the very important reasons.
Okay, right, communication, yes, we were actually missing this. So, Rahul, I would like to have your views on this before we wind
Yeah,
up the show.
I'm personally a staunch believer in the philosophy that Professor Rao just now stated, which is employees are themselves responsible for their fate, their growth, their career objectives, their ambitions. And if they actually need to do well for themselves in life, they need to be an engaged person themselves. However, sometimes in an organization which has got plethora of engagement initiatives, if you may like to use that word, it actually is failed from an employee side when he sees it through that this is an act, this is just about one event and not an activity which is going to be becoming a part of the journey or a process of the organization. When they see these kind of initiatives sometimes but never see a repeat or a follow-up action from the people who are responsible for engagement, they see it through and they just do not participate in the process. But still ownership lies with the employee. It is not an organization business. You better remain engaged if you actually want to create a great organization.
That was a great point. That was actually a very great point. So, here we have the final discussion that concluded that the ownership of employee engagement, success or failure actually lies with employee. And when you say employee engagement, it is not actually just an event; it is an ongoing activity. So we were really honored to have you all here on the show with us. Thank you for being with us and actually making this conversation more lively and interesting. So for our audience, it is the time for us to wind up the show. And if you like, thanks for being with us and join us again next week. See you
Thank you
again.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you
all of you,
all.
and really honored to participate in the process.
Pleasure. Yeah. Sure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Nice
Bye
to
Bye-bye.
meet you
bye.
all.
Thanks to all
Bye.
of you.